Good morning, all. Um, Today, finally, we'll be moving on to the actual sociology. Like I said several times, I think we have been, till now, whatever we were doing is mostly uh, to do with the background to sociology, how sociology was born, or why sociology is a science. These are all really in the background. From today onwards is the real theory that we are going to start. We are going to start with one of the greatest thinkers of modern times. I think if there is one man who has influenced modernity both globally and you at an individual level, the experience of modernity. Um, Invariably, it will be Karl Marx and Adam Smith. These are two sides of the coin. So we will be discussing Karl Marx today. Just remember that today's session is mostly an overview. We'll be discussing all the concepts that are mentioned in the syllabus, like mode of production, materialism, alienation, class struggle, things like that. But it is important for you to know that uh, all of this is just an overview. We are not going to go in depth into each topic at the level at which it is required for UPSC. We will. I want you to just come along and see what these topics just mean, because you need to be familiarized to these topics before you go deep into understanding what each of those means. So today I will do all of them quickly, and then each class we will do separately for each topic, or at least in one class maybe two topics we can take and discuss in depth, look at them critically, look at various ways in which UPSC asks questions for that respective topic, and then so that you're ready for UPSC standard. Today it is more like an intro, more like an overview for Karl Marx, and also give you a little bit of what is the background for Karl Marx. um, we in our everyday usage we use terms like class. What class does he belong to? Or we also use, in current affairs, we use terms like, oh, this is left-wing ideology, he is a right-wing politician, he's a. When we use these terms, what do they even mean? Where did they originate? Okay, he's a Marxist, he's a leftist. What do these terms mean? Today we will actually be going into the theory of what these things mean, and when did they come, why did they come, what do they represent, and not in a general casual way, but in a much more rigorous, serious way. We will try to understand what these terms mean. So we'll start with, so topics that will be covered today are: first, you need to understand that a lot of who we call Marxists today, or Marxism, and remember I told you, whenever we add ism, we are referring to its philosophy, its ideology, or its theory. So Karl Marx is an individual. He is given his own set of theories. He was in space and time at a particular juncture in history, and he was responding to the context, to the changes that were happening then. But later, after him, people have developed his theories into a full-fledged philosophy, into almost like a way of life, into a belief system. Wars have been fought, and a lot of lives have been lost. Governments have toppled, governments have come to power based on his ideas and concepts. So, but every time his ideas are taken, they are in a way modified, and all its variants. There are more than 100 variants of Marxism today, and all of that together you can label it as Marxism, very, very broadly. From feminist Marxism to post-colonial Marxism to Leninist to Maoist. Again, in Marxism, there is theoretical Marxism, there is praxis Marxism every day. Politics, because a lot of politics across the world, in almost all countries, there'll be one party that will be advocating Marx or Marxist ideals. So all of this is Marxism. And then there is just Marx who actually gave the theories, actually wrote the books. He was at some point in history responding to the changes that were happening around him. For our syllabus, we will mostly focus on Marx itself, although in the later portion of the syllabus, there are two important Marxists, Louis Althusser and Gramsci. We will be discussing them, but that is, we'll just touch them today. When their time comes, we will discuss them more in detail. So I'll basically give you the difference between what is Marx and Marxism and how they are different. And then, of course, we'll quickly go through Marx's biography. Where is he born? What did he do? Kind of a things. And then there are four major concepts that Marx has advocated. Stages of society. He says how the human society has progressed over time in history. And it is based on another concept called historical materialism. It's a slightly technical concept. It requires you to understand some ideas before understanding historical materialism. But the consequence of historical materialism is the stages of society. So you have four stages of society and a utopia, a desire for a fifth stage, a dream of a fifth stage, which is communism. Okay, we are also going to see when we use the word socialism, communism. And if you remember, these are all also part of your GS paper 1, straight away, what is socialism, what is communism, things like that. It would be really helpful if you focus on these parts, because this is as rigorous as those topics get, because they are sociological topics and we will discuss them. So in stages of society, we're going to see what those stages are. I think among, again, Marx's work, if there is one concept which could not be defeated, stages of society, historical materialism, his idea of mode of production, class struggle, all of these have been at some point criticized, even demolished by good thinkers later who came after him. They have been able to really attack all of these assumptions or theories and concepts. But if there is one concept that has been the hardest and one concept which really characterizes Marx, it is alienation. Okay, it's a concept that every individual in modern society can associate with, can experience, and can identify with, which is why it has also been the hardest and probably the best of Marx's work, alienation. We will discuss that. We will see an overview of it today. Then there is mode of production. Mode of production is, again, out of Marx's fundamental concept called historical materialism. He develops a concept called mode of production. Mode of production broadly refers to, it comes very close to, again, the stages of society. So each stage of society is one mode of production. Okay, historically, initially we were tribal societies. Then there was a time when we were feudal societies. Today we have capitalist society. Each of this is a stage, but each of this has its own mode of production. Okay, because Marx assumes that for a society, if you take a society, it has a structure like a building. It has a foundation, a base, and a superstructure. And it is important that he believes that whatever the base is will determine how the superstructure is. And the base for Marx is economy. The superstructure is religion, law, marriage, culture. Everything is above. So whatever is the basis of production, whatever is the mode of production, whatever is the economy in a particular society, like in a tribal society, it is hunting and gathering, for which you need tools, stone tools. And because it is that mode of production, production is basically just hunt, gather, and eat. So in tribal societies, the religion, the law, the marriage, the culture, the way they eat, the way they dress, everything will depend on hunting and gathering, which is the means of production. Anyway, we'll quickly go through that, the whole mode of production. And then, if time permits, today we will touch base on what is called class struggle. Again, a classic concept of Marx. So all these first three are more like the theory of Marx, Marx as a philosopher. Now, Marx is not just a philosopher. Marx is also a real-life activist. Very few people have been able to do that. Even today, a lot of professors try to be part of political movements. They don't succeed very well. I think recently one good example would be Yogendra Yadav from Jawaharlal Nehru University, professor of political science. And he is both a theorist and attempting to do politics. It is very, very difficult to be a good theorist, to be a good philosopher, and to practice. Those of you who might know, you're too young, but at least if you were 15 years older, most of people in my generation would know. There is another professor from Andhra, Professor G. Haragopal, who is also a renowned professor from Central University, Hyderabad, and he is also an activist. He has mediated between the state and the Naxals on many accounts at many instances. He's been the mediator to negotiate the deals between the Naxals and the state, the government of Andhra Pradesh, government of India. So anyway, so it is not very often that you see people who can do both theory and practice politics. But Karl Marx is probably the epitome that way. There is no one who has practically changed politics as much as Karl Marx has done, while also giving a theory as rigorous and as powerful as Karl Marx did. So, for his stages of society, for his alienation, for his mode of production, these three are his very rigorous theories. His practice is in class struggle. From these theories emerges a political ideology, and that political ideology is encapsulated in the concept of class struggle. We're going to discuss that. It is a logical progression from the earlier ideas. Okay. Before we move to the next topics, I just want to quickly hear from you. What is your conception? You must have heard Karl Marx at some point, whether it's while reading a paper or hearing news, or you may have a general way, or maybe if you watch Hollywood movies, they use the word commies, referring to communists. Okay, US derogatorily uses the word commies. Have you ever come across either the word communism or the word Marx, Karl Marx, and what do you think about it? Like, what is your idea about Karl Marx or communism? Yeah. Hebsi, did you raise your hand? You want to give it a shot?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, the communism term means what its aim is to replace that private property.
Good. Its aim is to replace private property. Okay. Okay.
And
That's a good.
that's it, sir. I had that. I just know
That is
about that
definitely one
much.
of the aims of communism. Yes, probably the single biggest aim of communism is to replace private property. Yes, yes, that's a good summary. That's a very good summary. Anyone else? Deepika, yeah.
Sir, communism means that there is no private property. Sorry. There is no private property, and then the property is owned by the working class, and the resources are distributed according to the needs of the person.
Okay. Yeah. Now you're explaining what communism is. Like, it's not only that there is a political aim there, which is the practical aim is that private property should be abolished. And then what is that is the idea, that is the goal. How do we reach there? By ensuring that property is then owned by the state, by the government. Okay, I can't keep doing the state and government. Earlier also I told you, this is the last time I'll be telling you, technically the word is state. Only when we are referring to the executive wing of the state, I will use the word government. Government is only a small part of a larger apparatus, of a larger structure called the state. So state is the technical word. I will stick to that so that you'll also pick the habit of using the word state instead of government. Okay. So state will own the property. And how does the distribution happen? You're right. Distribution happens according to the needs of people. Fair enough. Does anyone else wants to add anything that you've heard about communism or Marx? What does the word Marx ring in your head? Who might be, or any image, residual image that is as part of your learning process, anywhere you've come across, or any idea that you've picked from any movie? No? Okay. Okay. Now, I want you to tell me what you know that private property exists. There is private property. There are rich people, and there are Ambanis, there are Adanis who own a lot of
Sir,
property. Yeah, yeah, Hepsi.
sir, in our agriculture, in my bachelor degree, he stated a theory that we should capitalize farmers, sir.
We should
He,
capitalize farmers. Okay.
capitalist farm, yes.
Oh, you
Like
came across the word
he
capitalist farmers. Yes, yes, yes. Capitalist farmers. Okay. Uh, all right. That is a good one. And do you know what a capitalist farmer is? Do you think you can articulate who a capitalist farmer is?
Sir, I was not aware of that extent, sir, but
Okay,
I
okay,
read.
no problem. Okay, okay, okay. That is good.
Thank
Yeah, we will look at capitalist farmers both as part of another section called rural and agrarian society. But just to give, when we think of farming for longest period in history. Now we will look at those stages of history, right? So for the longest period in history, farming was done as a subsistence. It means I farm so that I grow food that I can eat, or I grow food that then I exchange for food with somebody and I can eat. That's it. It is a vocation or an activity that just ensured my subsistence. End of the matter. And unfortunately, in India, even today, a large number of farmers, 90% of our farmers are still subsistence farmers, which means they either produce for themselves, and usually they'll have a big piece of land. On that piece of land, they will grow paddy, wheat, sugarcane, one of those things. Then they will have a very small plot of land just around their house, where now even the big land is not a very big land, or the average land holding in India is less than 2 acres. I mean, it's like less than an acre actually. Compare that with, I don't know if you know how much an acre is. An acre is like one of your big, a big college. Okay, a decently big college is like an acre, and the average land holding in so in India, if you have 5 acres, you're a very big guy. You're a big landlord. If you have 10 acres and 15 acres, though, you're like rich. As opposed to that, think of it in US, the average land holding is about 5,000 acres. Yeah. So what is the difference then? The difference is here 2-3 acres of land, and then there'll be another small plot of land around the house where you put some vegetables. So you get your rice or wheat from your main land, and then from the very small portion, you get your vegetables, you cook, you live. You basically have one buffalo which will give you milk and curd, milk which is in curd. That's it. You're able to, all you have to do is build a house. These people know how to build a house. They build a house, they live. This is subsistence level living, and this is subsistence farming. Whatever paddy comes, they go to the market, they sell, and they buy other things that they need for survival. That's it. This is subsistence farming. This has been there across for thousands of years in major civilizations, whether it's Egyptian, whether it's the Chinese, whether it is Indian. This is the way. What is capitalist farming? Capitalist farming is when people go and buy lands and produce so that they can sell the produce and make profits out of it, just the way you make profits by selling cars. The entire activity is not a way of life, or it is not personal. It is just me buying more and more land so that I can use scientific technology, increase the produce as much as possible. Big conglomerates, big corporate houses, both in Europe and in the US, they own huge pieces of land, and they do farming as a venture, as an enterprise, like a business. They run it like a business. So I'll give you another example. For the longest time, you might know that actually even today, in India, dairy farms are still cooperative, which means many people own their cattle, cows, buffaloes, mostly buffaloes, and they milch. These are milch animals. They milk them, and they sell the milk to a cooperative like Amul or in Vishakha Dairy or whatever. and then those people then process and then they sell milk. If you remember, maybe before these factory system came, every village had its own. Maybe a big landlord had 10 buffaloes, poor people had none, beach may people had 1 or 2 cows or buffaloes, and that is how milk got circulated at each village level. But in the US, where it is capitalist dairy farming, just like agricultural farming, even dairy farming can be capitalist, where there will be 1,000 cows. Even in Europe, there will be 1,000 cows, 10,000 cows. Huge lands are put. Scientifically, they are segregated. The cows are segregated according to their periods, according to their cycles, and machines go, they clean the place, and there are machines that then milk them, which then take the milk, and all of this is automated through machine, and it happens. So when it happens like that, that is only a business. But if you go to the village, the people who own 1 and 2 cows, mostly it is just 1 or 2 buffaloes. It is a relationship with them. They drink some of that, they consume some of that milk, and some of that milk is just given to a cooperative. Can you imagine what is the difference both in attitude and in the way this is owned and managed? Okay, when you have 2 buffaloes in your own household, the way you own and manage them is very different from the way when you have 1,000 buffaloes. They're all just part of a business enterprise for you. They're all just for making profit for you. And there is a difference between the two. The same difference is also between a capitalist farmer and a subsistence farmer. Once we know more about capitalism, we'll get an idea. But for now, I think this would suffice. So let us now go to the PPT. One of the things that you need to understand is, like I said, there are so many variants of Marx's ideas have been taken and appropriated by different theorists, by different politicians. In politicians, there is Leninism, there is Maoism, there is Naxalism, and all of these are in some ways distributaries, of the core ideas of Marx. They have taken and they have appropriated to their respective contexts. So you may have seen Che Guevara. That's another iconic figure from South America, who has appropriated Marx. And the Latin American Marxism, the South American Marxism is very different from the South Asian Marxism, the Indian Marxism, and this is different from Chinese, and which is different from the Russian. So these are all why. The reason is because Marx thought he was giving, and he did in some ways give, the most universal form of Marxism. Okay, he called his socialism scientific socialism, because he imagined this is as accurate as science is. Like how theory of gravity or theory of laws of motion are. He imagined that his idea of socialism is called scientific socialism. He called it. It is because he believed that he has developed it as rigorously as Newton has, or how scientists develop science. Not a very vague, broad kind of a thing, but a very, very accurate, using a lot of data and reason. He has developed his idea of socialism, and therefore it is called scientific socialism. But the fact is that, like we discussed in the earlier sections, sociology can't be entirely a science. We are human beings. We interpret, we give meanings to things, and depending on the way we give meanings, things change. So you can't have an absolutely. So this scientific socialism was then taken in different contexts, in different times, by different people, and it has been repackaged. And all of these are called Marxism. In fact, this started happening while Marx was alive itself. Marx's ideas, just towards the end of his life, only towards the end of his life, he lived like a pauper. He lived very poor conditions. But towards the end, he started becoming famous, and he saw how his ideas were being appropriated and how the label Marxism started developing. And he famously said, at least it is believed that he said, it might be a rumor, he said, "I am not a Marxist." But anyway, you must have heard constantly we use in politics, or anchors use, and the left and the right, or left end of the spectrum or right end of the spectrum, whether it is between Republicans and Democrats while the contest is happening in the US or in India. we call that's a left-wing party, this is a right-wing party. Where do these terms come from? So remember I told you about French Revolution and how after the overthrow of Louis the 16th, the people go and they become part of the parliament. The commoners become part of the parliament, and in the parliament, when they are sitting, on the right side sat the more conservative, those people who believed in the feudal system and wanted the continuity of the authority of church and the continuity of the king and feudalism. And on the left side sat people who were against this system and they wanted a more progressive, a change in this kind of a system. They didn't want monarchy anymore. They didn't believe in the authority of church. They started adopting ideas of science and reason and empiricism. So these are the people who sat on the left side in that hall, in the parliament hall, which is where these terms of left and right come. Eventually, so one of the things about the left is they believe in the immense capacity of the human, which is why they are also often called, the term is called humanism or humanist, because they don't believe in God. Conservatives usually believe in God, they believe in tradition, they believe the order of things should be as they have been traditionally. The progressives or the liberals, or why liberals? Because remember the slogan during French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Of these three, again, the core is liberty, and this liberty is a very individual liberty. Okay, it puts individual at the center of the universe, the human, the individual, and again, not individual socially in a community, but individual as an individual. Now that is, so at that time, in fact, those who sat on the left were actually advocates of capitalism. Those who sat on the right at that time, initially, were actually advocates of the conservative feudalism. Today, when we say conservative, we are referring to those who support capitalism. But in those days, it was those who sat on the left who supported capitalism because they supported change, they supported progress. Capitalism was change, capitalism was progress, capitalism was more individual liberty. It treated everybody equally as a citizen. Everybody has equal right to vote, equal share of vote. So there was equality on the left, and on the right, they were all feudalism. They believed that humans are differentiated according to the tradition. There is hierarchy, there are feudal lords, and then there are commoners, and there is a difference between the two. Now, with time, of course, left has come to symbolize those who support change, those who support going away from existing system. Because at that time they were doing that, as opposed to the right wingers who often support the existing system. So in India, we will call BJP as conservative or right because they believe in the traditional system of our society being, they believe that our society should uphold our traditional values. Okay, that there is value, and there is some value really in continuing some of these traditions and some of these old practices. And also they believe in capitalism, and today the right end of the political spectrum is in support of capitalism. Usually it will be the left wing which will argue more for, okay, today nobody really argues for communism or socialism. Nobody will say ki, there are few people, but nobody who's really involved in the state of affairs in governing will say, let the state appropriate or let the state own all the property. So today we have a lot of debate about privatization, right? So you must be reading in your newspapers how BJP is privatizing PSUs, how it is intending to privatize banks, it is privatizing Indian Airlines. And there is hue and cry about, how can they do it? This is a right-wing party, this is a capitalist party, it is filling the pockets of Adani, Ambani. These kind of comments you often hear, and in newspaper you will read this. But what you need to understand is, at some point okay, most of you are from Visakhapatnam and you know Hindustan Shipyard Limited. Okay, do you know something? Hindustan Shipyard is actually at some point a private company. Why Hindustan Shipyard? The big HPCL that you see are Visakhapatnam after Bombay, other than Bombay, is the only other largest refinery for HPCL in the country. And our HPCL refinery was, so whether it is Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited or whether it is Hindustan Shipyard Limited, Hindustan Shipyard Limited was once a privately owned company. I think it is Hiralal Chand or something like that. I Hira Chand or some name like that. It was a private company. Indira Gandhi nationalized it. She at that point was practicing what Marx propounded 150 years ago. Marx in 1850s and 1860s, 120 years ago, because Indira Gandhi was doing this in 70s, in late 60s actually. So what was she doing? She was nationalizing. It is the opposite of privatizing. And these are cycles. You know, this happened thousands of years back. This happened now. Where what she did was, so by the way, HPCL, if you speak to your grandparents, they will tell you Caltex. It was called Caltex then. And do you know what Caltex stands for? It stands for California Texas Company. It was the largest petroleum refinery company in the world. It was their company. Indira Gandhi nationalized it. So these were at some point private companies. These were never, to begin with, government did not, of course, steel plant government did start it. Steel plant is a entirely government enterprise, but there were others which were actually not government enterprises. These were private companies that were nationalized. Banks, a lot of your banks, Andhra Bank, and in fact, she nationalized all banks. She said all banks are national, the government takes over. That's it, simple. One diktat and over. Today, so at that point, Indira Gandhi was acting out, was practicing socialism. In fact, I think it was that time that the word socialism itself was inserted into the preamble of the Constitution. And there is a whole debate whether such a term should be inserted or not, whether preamble can be changed or not. There are famous cases, you will read them in your polity. The one word socialism created so much debate because whether the state can just go and take that, that's a very interesting question, because when you are talking about things like private property, I want you to discuss and tell me, you have worked hard, made money, and brought 2 acres of land. Whether you want to keep it as a, so that tomorrow you can sell it, you want to keep it as a saving for your, if you're typically, a lot of people save lands as, for their children, either to pass it to them or to gift it to them eventually. Whatever your reason, you have acquired private property. You've built a house, you've built land, you've built a company. Okay, you've built a large factory. And then the government comes and says, in the interest of the society, we want to lay a highway here. It is part of a large national project. And therefore, we need to either demolish your factory or the highway is going to go over your piece of land. Which means, and when a highway goes, some part this side and that side, both sides are gone, obviously. So almost your entire acre of land is gone. 2 acres of land is gone. I want you to tell me, is that fair? Is it fair for government to take over private property for public use, for larger good? This is a debate that will almost every week you will have one or the other issue that will come in newspaper. I will tell you how to connect that, but you tell me, what do you feel? Is it fair on government's part for the larger good to take your individual private property? Yeah, Hepsi.
Sir, even though the government takes our property, but they are providing some, like they are giving somewhat what we lost. So I was thinking,
Compensation. It's called compensation.
compensation, yes. I was,
Okay.
uh,
Um, you might not know this, but very often the real value, which is called the market value of a property, is much lower. Sorry, the market value of a property is much higher than uh, the registered value or government value. So when government values your land, it values at a much lower price than its actual value. So you may have given 2 crores to buy that property, and government will give you about 40-50 lakhs. Now, okay, but okay, leave it. So, but that's compensation is a good idea. Let's take this compensation a little forward, but we will hold on to it. Anyone else? What do you think? Is it fair or not? Pavan.
Sir, if fair compensation is provided,
Deepika, go on. Pavan, you can talk after Deepika. Yeah, Deepika, go on.
sir, if fair compensation is provided, the property taken by the government can be used for like to provide infrastructure, which will provide more employment in the society.
Okay. So you would say that if it is fair compensation, because then there is a systemic error. If why should the government value be less than the market value? There is a problem there. And so what you guys are arguing, whether it's Hebsi or whether Deepika, what you're saying is if the compensation is fair, state. Now, what is state? State is only, at least in democratic polities, in democratic political systems, state is nothing but we guys, through a fair election process, we elect our government. So in one ways, because all of us can't rule at the same time, we have other lives to live, we choose a person who will represent our will, who we believe he symbolizes my aspirations, what I want to do, what I want my government to do, he does it. Which is why they come and they give promises. We vote based on ideologies. We vote based on what promises. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I mean, in textbook, this is all what we say, but in reality, people vote based on what they believe. They are at one level. They vote on the belief of, if this person comes, it is going to benefit me in this way. At the local level, it is usually at that level. And at a macro level, at the prime minister and the chief minister level, it is in some ways, at least as far as the current prime minister is concerned, he's an aspiration. He's an inspiration. He's like, if a lowly common man can grow to this level, probably we can too. So he inspires. He's an inspiring personality, and that is what then makes people vote for his party. So anyway, so there are different reasons why we vote, but at least in theory, we vote based on ideology, and every party has its manifesto. If you know, every party launches something called the manifesto, and with Marx, we are going to actually, I will, once you come to the class, I will read excerpts from his most famous manifesto called the Communist Manifesto. It's a very thin book. It's a beautiful book. I will recommend that you read it page to page. It will take 1.5 hours sitting. Just sit and read. I will read passages to you from that book. It is definitely one of my favorite books. But we will do that. And now, in that manifesto, the party will tell what they intend to do. And if you feel this is what I want for my country, you vote for them. And then they come to power, and they are ruling on our behalf, on society's behalf. So in other words, whatever the state does is what the society wants. Okay. Now, the state, when it takes away somebody's property, it is basically saying the society is taking away an individual's property. In other words, what you are saying is societal needs trump, or they are more important than individual needs or individual wants. Okay, you are basically saying what the society demands or wants is more important than what an individual interest or wants are. Yeah. Let us assume for a second, and if in our society there is a difference between government value and market value, that is a problem in the system, and that can be rectified, and increasingly it is being rectified. So assume there is fair compensation. I want you to tell me, does the society versus individual, think of it like that, then do you think the society or state representing the society can take away an individual's freedom, property? Can it do that? Yeah. Pavan, you raise your hand.
Yes, sir. Sir, I've learned this in the polity that in a case of Supreme Court has told that we don't follow the Marxian socialism, but then we follow the Fabian or the Gandhian socialism.
Very interesting. Yes. Okay. So what about it? Is there any
So
other point?
in the Fabian socialism, they say that there should be a government interference when coming to the privatization part.
Okay. There should be government interference when it comes to private.
Privatization.
But Marxian socialism also says that. In fact,
Marxian Marxian socialism says that there should be a revolution for the socialism to be attained in the country.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Remember class struggle, one of the concepts that I said, the practice of Marx. In class struggle, finally, what Marx propounds is that capitalists are always holding power, which is actually the case. Unseen, they actually hold a lot of power, and there is no way for the masses, the proletariat, to take power from the capitalists. Okay, at least there is not going to be a negotiation. So Marx propounds the only way then is a revolution. There is going to be a class struggle. There are the capitalists and the workers, working class, or the more technical terms I've earlier explained to you once, bourgeoisie and proletariat. So the proletariat has to come together, revolt, and take over the power of the state. And once you take over the power of the state, democracy will definitely help because these are larger in numbers. So they take over the state. Once they take over the state starts nationalizing private property. Okay. And so for them to take over the state, there has to be a revolution, is what they say. And some people say it has to be a bloody revolution. It has to be violent. If it has to be violent, it has to be violent. Some say no, it doesn't have to be violence. So you have Mao, who proposes a cultural revolution rather than a more. But even then, a lot of blood was shed. Anyway, so yeah, Deepika.
Sir, land reforms was also possible because of this idea, no, sir? Like, if we serve the individual interest, then land reforms will never come into existence.
What do you mean land reforms?
Like, the big landlords who were holding large pieces of land, they were taken away by the government and then redistributed to the
Peasants. Do you think that happened? That was a promise. These days, political parties stopped promising that also. But in the initial days of independence, the Socialist Party and the Communist Party had a very large following. And one of the promises that they always made was land distribution and land reforms. Yes. In those days, people used to buy that. To some extent, it happened in Kerala. Land reform happened to a degree in Kerala, thanks to the efforts of one politician. But in many other places, it has always remained a promise. It is not that easy, because remember, those who are high in political power are actually the ones who own the land also. They are landlords. So nobody will do something against their own interest. This is classic what Marx has actually foreseen. He said they will control the state, the bourgeoisie, although they are smaller in number because they have larger resources at their disposal. They will control the state directly or indirectly. Either they are directly, say Donald Trump. Trump is a large and successful capitalist in the US, and eventually he came into politics. And will he do anything against the interest of the capitalist class? Because any decision that he takes is going to affect his own companies, his own corporates, and definitely his profits. So he's not going to do that. Or they will be behind. They will stand behind, and they will ensure that certain laws are made or not made, because they are the ones who fund parties. They are the ones who are giving resources. They are the ones who are paying taxes. So they are in a very powerful place, and it's not so easy to pass a law against them. India, although, has a very different trajectory from the West. Okay, a lot of what I tell, you have to be careful what part of it is applicable to the West and what part of it is applicable to India. In India, at the national level, we have one story that is going. At the state level, there is another story that is going on, and these stories many times are almost opposite to each other. But as far as land reforms are concerned, yes, you are right that you cannot have land reforms without this law, but forget about the law. What I want you to discuss is, do you believe that it is all right for the society to take an individual's liberty? Yeah, Deepika, go on.
Sir, actually, in Western countries, compensation was not provided to the big landlords, but only in India, compensation was provided during land reforms. And also, yes, sir, like to serve the purpose of the society, like if it benefits the society, maybe we can consider the interests of the society rather than the individual, because if government uses it in a right way to build infrastructure facilities and all, they can provide employment to several people, like
Okay.
huge population gets benefited from it.
Fair enough, fair enough. I mean, in reality, there is never going to be that efficiency that we are talking about. But because we are arguing at a principle level, let's assume that yes, every penny that has been taken over because of through nationalization, or when the state takes over the property, let's assume it is put for good use. Then you are saying it is all right for the society to take over an individual's right or property.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, okay. I want Altaf or Pavan to, or Prashanti, Sai Prashanti, one of you to. So that is Deepika's position. She says, if it can be put to good use, if it is accountable, if it is a fair and transparent system, it is all right for the state to take over private property of an individual, and for larger good, for building infrastructure or whatever. Then it's all right to do that. What are your views, Pavan, Prashanti, and Altaf and Hepsi?
Sir, actually, this is the reason why right to property was removed as a fundamental right.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The others, I want you to respond to. Deepika has given stated her position. What do you guys think? Do you also think that if it is for the larger good, the state can go ahead and forcefully take. Of course, you may say given compensation, but no, it's my house. You may give compensation, but it's still my house. I have memories with it. You're still taking it for. Basically, you're doing it against my will. In a market, when we exchange, we do it willfully. We do it like you are not saying I will give you as much like how in a market, if somebody wants to buy a house from me, they have to come and give me. If they want to take my house, they have to give me enough amount that satisfies me, not market value, not government value and all, right? But a state is forcefully coming and taking it. There is force there, and you are saying it is all right to use that force with fair compensation and assuming that all of this is used well. Yeah, who raised the hand? Is it Hepsi?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Sir,
Hepsi, go on.
sir, I was thinking that we should proceed as per the rules, like as per the government force, because they have the they were the higher authority, and we cannot abstract them. So as we are
Just because
thinking
they have
about,
the authority.
they are like they were taking our property for the larger use. So I was thinking that we should proceed according to the government, even though
Okay.
we may had a connection with it, but it was for larger use. So
Okay, so you also believe the larger good trumps individual rights. I will
yes,
repeat it. The larger good trumps individual rights. Money for the larger good, even if you have to hurt one's individual, it is all right. Yeah. I assume that is, please understand that is where the principle is going. So, yeah, Hebsi is also there. Pavan, do you
Sir,
want
even
to?
I'm with this, sir. Like, if it's for the greater national integrity and sovereignty, then it
Okay.
is fine with the state to interfere with our individual property.
All right. Now, okay. Usually, the classic argument against, and Sai Prashanti and Altaf, do you want to state your positions? Do you agree, disagree?
Yes, sir, I agree.
You agree.
Yes, sir.
Maybe, sir, but just compensation is not good.
Mhm.
But according to the market value, state should fairly compensate them. That would be good for an individual. Because
But I don't.
if it's
Mhm.
his personal house or a business firm, then the individual may lose his way of living.
Livelihood, yes. He will lose his livelihood. That's right. So, but see, you guys are not getting the point. Compensation, let's say they are making very good compensation, but I don't want it. I don't want it at this time. I am attached to my house. My grandmother died in that house, and I want to live in that house. Can the society then forcefully take it?
so I was thinking that the place where we had the connection is belong to us only, but others will not think about it, no, sir. So
Yeah. So then we should we. So that is what. Imagine now we are talking whether right to property is a fundamental right or not. I am asking you, we can make it a law. We can say it's a fundamental right. So a right to property is a fundamental right. Money, if the person doesn't want to sell, you cannot take it. You make an offer that is good enough then. If it is so important for you, for the society. So there are many Western countries where right to property is a fundamental right. Where even the state, like any other player, has to come and make an offer that you want to sell. If you don't, then you don't. That's it.
Sir, even though if we don't want to sell, but in some cases, as we see in news, that the government and that was illegally taking like even they will first they will announce we have to away we should like we have to leave the place, but even though we didn't, they are taking it as a forceful leave.
Yes.
So then how come we can say that we can fight, sir? Because they are taking it as a force.
No. So you are talking about reality, Hibzi. I am talking about, let's say we are today, we are the people who are making the law for this country. Okay. And today we can make a new law that says the state cannot take, and we have the power to implement it also. I am talking at a principle level. Please forget what the reality is. Practical level, much more. Come to the principle level with me. And in principle level, you tell me, can we? So most of you are saying then it is fair to go ahead. Now, I want to ask you something. One man, orphaned, he works hard, very intelligent, puts effort, grows, gets a job, grows, studies while he is doing the job, distance education, becomes a big man, then starts a small business, successful, works day and night. By the time he's 50, he makes an empire. There is a large factory that he's built. 50 years of his sweat and toil, literally his labor has gone into it. Now, the basis for right to property, please understand, is from a thinker called Mills, J.S. Mills. Don't bother about the names. It's not important. This is all to give you a logic. This is very important for your constitution and Indian polity also. Why is right to property in many countries a fundamental right? First, understand that. What are fundamental rights? Fundamental rights are those rights which even the state cannot touch. Even the state has to respect those rights. Okay, those are fundamental rights. For example, the right to live, the right to liberty. Okay, so the state without due procedure cannot take your life. It cannot forcefully, just willfully, like arbitrarily can't just take your life. There should be good reason, and in many countries even that is removed. Capital punishment is entirely removed because nobody can take another person's life. We are all coming together to make the state. Okay, sometimes your aspirations might win politically, ideologically speaking. Say education, universities, private universities should be allowed or not. On a matter like that, there can be disagreement. But when we are all coming together and making this powerful beast, Leviathan is another word that is used. It's like a beast. We are giving away our individual powers to hurt each other. So, which is why if somebody say you're going on a car or you're going on a road and somebody hits you and you get down and punch that person, he can put a criminal case on you. And you can't say he hit me first or he hit my vehicle first. No, you hitting another person is a crime. The state, you should report it to the police station and the police will take action against it. Okay, you can't just go and hit another person because that right has been taken away from you. The state says, I will do it. I will put police and they will do it for you. Okay, they are the ones who will maintain what is called law and order. Now, what I'm saying is we have given away our right to self-defense. You can't carry a gun and walk around, can you? Only the state, only the police has gun because only they can. In fact, if you notice the symbols that they have, above the rank of DIG onwards, no, not the DIG, actually, DGP, ADGP onwards, they have a baton and a sword. Sword basically symbolizes force. Even baton symbolizes order, but sword symbolizes force to even kill. Sword traditionally is used to kill a person. It's an instrument of death. You are allowed to wear that. You are allowed to. I mean, it basically symbol. What does it symbolize? It symbolizes carrying a gun. What does carrying a gun symbolize? You can use force. Only state is allowed to use force. You are not allowed to use force. But that same state can't use it against you arbitrarily. Right? A police person can't just come and slap you or hit you or things like that. You shouldn't. It happens, that's a different story. In principle, you shouldn't. We are slowly going to that principal place. We are developing. There are definitely Western societies that have gone there, where police is not going to manhandle you. And I'm not talking about US. In US they do, but there are European societies which don't. They really mean that kind of a system. Anyway, what I'm saying is, but we have given away these rights in return, that there are certain fundamental rights that even precede the state. We all come together and we have instituted it for our convenience. All of us came together and we said, okay, for our convenience, let's make a state. In that state, who will govern? Let us choose. But who will govern and let us choose for what? Only to most things about life. But there are certain things that are so sacred, that are so fundamental, that irrespective of which government comes or who comes to power, those things cannot be touched. On the other hand, it is the state's responsibility to protect those rights, and those are fundamental rights. One of those fundamental rights is, in other countries, in India, there is a whole debate. It has been finally removed from the right to property has been removed from fundamental rights, but at some point it was there as fundamental right. Why? Because all of this comes from an assumption that J.S. Mill says, that nobody has a right to harm your body. Okay, because self-preservation is before all of these laws and state and government. All of these are later creations. We came together and we created it. But self-preservation is in nature. Okay, we want to protect ourselves more than anything else. And even the state shouldn't come and harm me or my body. So my body is my right. Anything that happens to my body is my private sphere, and it's my right. It is my private thing. It is not a public thing. You can't interfere. You can interfere in public matters. The state is interested in the public matters, but my body is my private space, and that cannot be touched. Now, pay attention to the word private. Yeah, my body. So things like my sexuality is my private thing. The state shouldn't interfere. And today we are moving there. Even Indian state is moving to a point where it is saying, yes, sexuality is a private affair. Why should the state interfere and say homosexuals are criminals or whatever else? We can't do that. Okay, now see. Mills believed that when a person toils, take a farmer who goes, takes a piece of land and works. The land in nature, it is wild. It has trees, it has stones, and he takes all of that, he removes them, he removes the trees, he makes the land, he then sows the seeds, he turns it into a farm. If you think of it like a sculptor who takes a stone, or a carpenter who takes a piece of wood and turns it into whatever that a piece of furniture is, a farmer is taking a piece of land and turning it into a farm. In all three cases, whether it is a sculpture or a piece of furniture or this, a human body is putting its mind and effort, physical effort, and creating a new piece. According to Mills, my toil, my labor, my body and my mind has in some ways seeped into that furniture, that sculpture, that painting, and that piece of land. Therefore, that becomes private property. That is why it is called private property, because I am in it. I have given that my body, my energy, my mind has moved into it, has seeped into it. It is a product of my labor. Therefore, it is mine. Now, so to affect it is to affect my body. To forcefully take it away is to forcefully take away my body, a limb of me, maybe my hand. And you can't do that. Even if it's for larger good, you can't do it. That is the basis for right to property.
Sir, I don't know whether I can link these both topics or not, but in the previous class, we have studied about positivism, no, sir?
Mm-hmm.
So, in positivism, sociologists try to explain that sociological explanations should be objective and they should be independent of individual. We should not consider psychological terms while explaining while giving the sociological explanations. So over here we are considering individual more rather than the society in the discussion just now which we had.
Okay. You mean my position? My position was taking the
Yes, sir.
individual
Yes, sir.
more than the society. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir. But sociologists try to create uh, like all those rules which are applied to a society as a whole and not considering individuals' interests. That is what positivism we read, like Durkheim and all has
Yes.
stated.
Yes, yes, yes. You're right. You're right. Okay, I want to counter you at two levels. One is so you are saying ki just summarize it once again in one sentence.
Okay, sir. Like sociological explanations should be objective
Macro.
and they should be independent of the psychological terms and all.
Objective. Okay, you are confusing between psychology, which is subjective, and individual. Okay, you can have explanations or you can have analysis at an individual level, which is not subjective. It is still objective. Okay. Anyway, positivism, yes. The word that you should use is macro. Okay, macro is taking the entire system and looking at it, not parts of it, not like not at an individual level, but at a macro level. In fact, these are called macro sociologists, macro sociologies. Just like in economics, you have microeconomics, macroeconomics. In sociology, you have micro sociology, macro sociology. Micro sociology looks at the individuals. They look at what you are saying, the psychology, psychological development. How does a child begin to see himself as part of the society and things like that, which is microsociology. But that is not what I am saying. What I am saying is, as a society is consisting of individuals, and we need to agree upon what is the fundamental right of an individual. It applies for every individual in the society, not according to their psychological temperaments or not at that level. You are doing something for the individual, and it applies to every individual. Like I say democracy. Now, is democracy a macro concept or a micro concept? Democracy.
Macro concept.
It's a macro concept, right? Because it applies. But what does democracy mean? It means every one of us. I mean, don't say things like for the people, by the people, and of the people, all of that. But what does it really, materially, principles, ideologies, what does it boil down to? It boils down to one principle, that every individual has equal share of vote. Every individual has one vote which we can exercise and choose our government. So, democracy is also at an individual level. Democracy is a system that you have created, assuming that every individual has equal voice in choosing, in deciding who should represent their will. Your representative, your local representative or you can choose. And in the process of choosing it, we all have equal share. We all is who? At an individual level. So democracy is also, as a concept, it came, but it came is when the discussion started at an individual level. It said that it is not God who institutes the state. It is not tradition that institutes the state. It is we individuals, we come together, we give away a part of our right, and we create the state. But I am talking about individual like that. When that individual is giving away a part of their right, what rights are they giving away and what rights do they not give away? You are arguing that in the right to property is given away. I am saying what is problem with giving it away? Okay, but yeah, I hope I have. Does that explain? Does that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Deepika, whenever I say, or the rest of you also, whenever I say, if you're convinced or not, only say yes if you are. Otherwise, we can try to discuss that further, because If someone else is not convinced, then it would help. So don't just say, because I've given an answer and I'm like, are you convinced? You should say yes. It's not like that. If you're not, you can just say no. Anyway, so that is about some basics of Marx and Marxism, and it's an interesting discussion on private property. Now we will move to Marx's biography. Again and again, I will make this statement: every thinker is a product of his own time. So you need to understand the context in which a thinker has worked for you to understand why he gave those kind of theories. Okay. Now, Karl Marx was born in 1818, 5th May. He's a German. He was born in Germany to a very rich lawyer. He was born almost like a feudal lord. Okay. But due to his own proclivities, due to his own inclinations, he has left all of that. He studied law at the University of Bonn and at the University of Berlin. He was influenced by another thinker called Hegel. Hegel was at that time the most famous thinker, and there was a lot of people. There was a club called Young Hegelians Club who would come and discuss Hegel's theories. There is a particular theory called Hegel's theory of spirit, and Marx was also part of that club. But at some point, Marx disagreed with Hegel's position, which is why there is one question in UPSC, and very often it is said that Marx took Hegel and turned him upside down. Okay, Marx, or another quote is, Marx took Hegel and put him with his head down. Okay, it is basically because Marx is greatly influenced by Hegel, particularly Hegel's one idea, which is called dialectics. It's a technical term. We'll not go too detail into it, but it basically means progress happens in contradictions. Progress happens in contradictions. Basically, there is an idea A and there is an idea B, which is the opposite of idea A, the diametrically opposite of A. And both these ideas then come together, and there is a new idea, which is idea C, which is better than both the ideas. I'll give you an example. So dialectics is a word that comes from Greek, ancient Greek, from Plato's time. In Plato's time, how did knowledge or how did ideas come about is, there'll be a group of people who will sit, and one man will propose an idea. He'll say the earth is flat, or the sun is revolving around the earth. And then someone will say, maybe, but maybe this is also the case, and he will counter it. He will give evidences. How does our discussion happen? You know, when you are sitting with a group of your friends, you are having coffee, there is a discussion that's happening. You propose something, someone else opposes it. It is the opposite. It's the contradiction. So the first proposition is called the thesis, and its opposite is called antithesis. There will be a discussion that's happening between the two people, and together they arrive at a new conclusion, which is called the synthesis. Okay. Now, the synthesis, the new idea, is now the new thesis. And iska, there is again an antithesis. And between these two, there will be again a lot of discussion that happens. And then again, there will be a new synthesis. And for that new synthesis, again, the process repeats. This is how progress happens. This is dialectical. They believe that in universe, in ideas, there is always contradictions, and it is those contradictions that allow for movement forward. Okay. Now, this is Hegel's idea, and Marx definitely borrows this. Marx borrows another idea. Now, this is called dialectics. If you didn't understand, or if dialectics is slightly philosophical concept, we will discuss more about it in detail. I told you that we will not go in depth. There is another idea called materialism. And materialism says that, so to the extent of dialectics, Marx did borrow from Hegel, because Marx is a dialectician, or he is somebody who believed in dialectics. But where Marx differed from Hegel is, Hegel believed that the mind, they use the word spirit in the German language, they use the word equivalent of spirit. Here, spirit just means mind. It doesn't mean some ghost or something like that. In fact, the word ghost also means the mind. Anyway, so when they are using the term, they are referring to mind. Now, between mind and matter, what comes first? There is, whether it is in the Hindu philosophy, whether it is in the Greek philosophy, whether it is in the Christian philosophy, there is a lot of discussion and debate on what comes first. Very often, almost all religions will say the mind comes first. So if you take the Hindu philosophy, the Christian philosophy, and the Islam and the Jews and all, they clearly say the spirit comes first, the mind comes first. Consciousness, the ultimate consciousness is God himself. God comes first. God is pure consciousness, pure spirit. And from that spirit, he makes the universe, he makes nature, he makes matter, material, all of that. Same with the Hindu philosophy, with the Asian philosophies, they say the Paramatman, the pure consciousness comes first. If you know that typical photo of Lord Vishnu sleeping on the in the seabed on a serpent, and there are dreams that are coming, and each of those dreams is a universe. But basically, all of that means is that there is a Paramatman. This is, see, visually representing some of these ideas are very hard, which is why you have these stories of, and you have these depictions. These depictions are symbols. These are very rich symbols. If you interpret them, you will understand what it means. But basically what it means is that there, and even in Jainism and Buddhism, it's the same concept, that there is a Paramatma, there is a pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is pure mind, pure thought, pure spirit. And from that pure spirit, matter emerges in the form of stone, in the form of a tree, in the form of an animal, in the form of a human. Human is uniquely gifted in that he has slightly higher consciousness than the rest of the universe, the rest of the material existence. And through that, he is capable of being enlightened to the point that his consciousness, that little consciousness that he is holding in the body, can become part of the pure consciousness. Now, this is also roughly what Hegel is propounding, whatever I just said, that the mind comes before the body, before matter. Now, all of this at the broadest level. At a much more narrower level, what is saying is that when you see a pot, Hegel would argue that the pot that you're seeing was first conceived in the mind. It was first a thought. Somebody thought of a pot, and then they took mud, they took clay, they worked on it and created, and then from they turned material into, they put their thought into material and made a pot. So before the pot existed in matter, in material, it existed in thought, in idea, which is why this is also called idealism. This idealism is not your idealism. This idealism is basically believing, remember I told you about Plato and I talked about archetypes. I said the color red, the shape circle is an archetype. It's a perfect circle. The idea exists first, and all of these are imperfect represented. The potter thought of a pot and then created the pot. So idea precedes matter. All of this is good. Now, there came a thinker called Feuerbach, Feuerbach. He is another person who influenced Marx the most. So Marx is influenced by two major thinkers. One is Hegel and the other is Feuerbach. Feuerbach is a materialist. Marx took dialectics from Hegel and he took materialism from Feuerbach. Feuerbach says, you are not going to think much on an empty stomach, will you? No. If you don't have food to eat, you will die. There is no thought. Thought exists in the mind exists in the brain exists in the body is matter. So whatever thought that you're saying that thought comes first, matter is only a representation. It is actually the other way around. It is the matter that creates the thought. He also argues, when you think of flying, when you think of a plane or a helicopter, what you're doing is you're looking at nature and you're looking at a bird. Bird is a real thing. It's a material thing. It exists. And from there, you're getting inspired of aeroplane, and then you create aeroplane. So your thought itself is inspired from matter, from reality, from nature around you. So it is the material that comes first, not the idea. So when there is a person who believes the material is the first and the more basic, the real thing, idea is superficial, he is called a materialist. And this is why Marx takes dialectics and materialism, and Marx's theory is called dialectical materialism. How does he combine them? We will go in detail later. That is not part of this thing. But for now, it is important just for you to know that Marx is taking materialism and taking dialectics. So that dialectics he took at University of Bonn, Berlin, between 34-35. Remember 34-35, I think in India, we are being colonized. The East India Company is increasing its this thing. We are still largely, compared to what is happening there, technologically much more backward at that point. At that point, these people were already at this level. After that, in 40s, he went to University of, it is spelled as Jena, but it is pronounced as Jena. He went to the University of Jena. In my next class or the class after that, I will have a researcher call you, or we will have a 10-15 minute session. He is doing research at University of Jena right now, and I want to quickly show you. Maybe he will show you a video of what the university and what that center looks like. Maybe we can also see Marx's memorial there. So he will interact with you. He's also a development economist. He was with me at Cambridge, and now he's at Jena. So we'll have like a 15-minute conversation with him, just for you to know these things should not just be theory and ideas, but so that you understand the reality of it. You understand, you associate with what it really, and it's a beautiful place. It's an extremely beautiful place. That is where Marx got his doctoral thesis from. He did his PhD from. Then he started giving ideas which were too radical for Germany, and the German government passed a dictate saying that this fellow, if he is found, put him in prison. So he was a troublemaker. Wherever Marx went, he was a troublemaker. So Marx fled. He ran away from Germany and moved to Paris. Paris was, for a long time, even today, one of the more progressive places for ideas and theories and trying out new things, experiments. And at that point, it was also a major power. So Marx definitely ran away from Germany and moved to Paris. In Paris, he met Friedrich Engels, who is his lifelong best friend, philosopher, guide, and more importantly, he was his patron. Marx was always a poor person. He did not have a place to stay. Many times he did not have even food to eat. He used to spend 14, 15, 16 hours in library, either studying and making notes and writing his books. The one person who supported him financially through all of this, sat with him, listened to his ideas, discussed with him, believed in him, was Friedrich Engels. In fact, many of Marx's works were done along with Friedrich Engels. The whole debate that we had about private property, there is a beautiful book by together, both of them, by Marx and Engels put together. They say that almost all social problems in the world is because of private property, and they say private property itself is a consequence of the marriage system, of a family and marriage system. If you don't have marriage and you don't have a family, if the institution of marriage itself is broken, then what will happen? Then people won't come together as a family. And if they are not as a family, the problem right now, they say, is people want private property, or people support private property because you want to make sure that your children get the best. They believe it is very selfish. They believe parents want to leave an inheritance for the children, which is why they protect private property. They say if children belong to everybody. There was a time in Greece, ancient Greece, when children were, there was, and they talk about that in the book, and they say those were city states. They were very small city states, like Athens and all, which take away every children, and there was no marriage, or there was a very weak form of a marriage. So basically, which means that men could sleep with women and women could sleep with men and procreate and all kinds of things, and nobody knew whose child is who. And all children were taken into a school kind of a place, and there they were trained. So nobody knew whose child was who. When that is not there, how much interest, people, they can make little property, they can make a house. One house is something that you need to live, you need clothes. But today, think of how people own estates, large estates, and many estates like that. Why do they own that? It is so that they can bequeath it, so that they can leave it for their children. Will they really do that if they don't have children? According to Engels and Marx, people won't. According to Engels and Marx, people try to make private property because they have children, and they therefore oppose the very institution of family and marriage now, which is why that particular work is extremely used by feminists, especially the Marxian brand of feminists use that work a lot. So that is about Friedrich Engels. We will listen to this name a lot in most of his Marxist works. Engels is also there. Now, there again, he went to in Paris. He created. He was part of a party, and he started giving ideas. He gave Communist Manifesto in 1948. Like I said, it's a brilliant book. We are going to read excerpts from it. He then started creating trouble there also. His writings, his ideas, there is uproar, there is revolution, there is struggle, there is violence. So again, the French government said, this fellow is a troublemaker. If you find him, put him behind the bars. He then again had to run away in exile from France, and he went to UK, Britain, London. The rest of his life he lived in London. He died there. His memorial, his body is buried there. It is still there in London. After that, he wrote, in London is where he wrote some of his famous books. 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, a contribution to the critique of political economy, Das Kapital, the capital. In English, it's just capital. In German, it was called Das Kapital. Volume 1. There are also Volume 2 and Volume 3, which never got really published. Today they are available in notes forms. He was making notes. He tried to give a very elaborate theory, a very, very large. It's called a meta-narrative. Anyway, so Das Kapital. Then his wife died in 1881, and yeah, so in 1860s, 70s, most of his work is coming, and Marx himself died in 1883. Again, the timelines are not too important. Even the names of the books, you don't have to memorize them now from the PPT. But over time, when you're writing a particular para, either don't quote, just say Marx. But if you are giving the name of the book, it does add a little value. I mean, it's just a small brownie point. You may get it. So, but we will mostly be using 4 books only. Communist Manifesto, which is not really a book. It is a manifesto. Which is why it is much more accessible. You can easily understand, but the rest of the books are very hard to follow, especially the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, the Critique to Political Economy, and the Das Kapital. These are the 3 major books, very rigorous theoretical works. Slightly, we will not do any of them. I mean, for your syllabus, these are too high. I will only give excerpts, and to your syllabus only we will do, but it's good every once in a while. He writes brilliantly. He's an amazing writer. So we'll just see 1 or 2 paras from each book that are relevant to your answer, which when you're writing your answer, if you mention that quote, you will get, you'll make a better impression on the examiner. So that's about Marx's biography. Okay. So remember I said that Marx also believed in what is called historicism. Now, historicism, remember, ism means philosophy, an idea or an ideology. It's a belief system. Historicists or historicism is a belief that history moves forward, that as history moves forward with the time, things are always progressing. It is a belief. That need not be the case. Actually, think of it. I know that because we are also part of modernity, we are all part of modernity, which is why to you it might appear, but isn't that very natural? With time, everything improves, everything increases, everything is progressing. Actually, no, it isn't. Many times there is decay, there is cyclical, there are all kinds of things. It need not be a linear progression all the time. When you zoom in enough, you will see it. But that's what some of these beliefs are internalized so much, and you may have never heard of it as a belief. I mean, nobody came and ever taught you that, do you know what, with time everything progresses. No, but it is such an underlying assumption behind everything that we learn that we just take it for granted. Okay, now that is historicism. And remember, materialism is anyway there. I told you that matter precedes the mind. Matter precedes idea. Material is more important than idea. If you don't have food, which is material, you're not going to have ideas, you're just going to die. So it is material that gives ideas and not the other way around. Anyway, Marx joins these two ideas and he creates historical materialism. He says societies have because he's an historicism, he believes in historicism, he believes that the human societies progress over time. He took all societies and he put them in 4 stages: the primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, and capitalism. What is primitive communism? Primitive communism is before any civilization came, when man was still a hunter-gatherer. The entire community, that particular maybe a kinship tribe kind of a thing, in some ways this is very close. This is even before tribes actually, but you can say about tribes time. Primitive communism, this was a period for more than 1 million years actually. So during that period, what did people do? I mean, people went, they hunted, they gathered food. Usually they say men were the one who hunted and women were mostly gatherers. Gatherers want to gather fruit, gather seed so that they can come, which is why there is a belief in anthropology and history that agriculture was probably started by women and not men. Because when there is a settlement, women used to stay back at the settlement and do the gathering. Men used to go for the hunting and bring the prey. Part of the reason is because men's bodies are in a certain way, but more importantly, women used to bear children. They used to bear children as early as 16, 17. Onwards, they start bearing children. So it is not very comfortable to carry the young and move and all that. And in a settlement, there is security, there is safety. And and that is why women usually stayed back at the settlement. They were more. But because they had then time on their hands, they were the ones who would experiment with seeds, with the fruits that they're getting. And they must be the ones who started agriculture, farming, put a seed and see that it grows and understand these processes. And therefore, and that is then the basis for civilization. Okay, farming and agriculture is the basis for civilization. And so in some ways, the belief is that, or it is largely agreed that women started human civilization. Okay, now, imagine in that society how people used to be. They're all equal. Nobody has property. In fact, nobody owns it. There is no concept called ownership. The nature is readily available. The river is there. The forest is there. The trees are there. The mountain is there. The food is there. And we all live together like a family. Everybody takes care of everybody else. If you see a pack of wolves or a herd of zebras, they do take care of each other. I don't know if you ever noticed, actually, even if a lion comes and hunts and attacks a wild bison, the other bisons are going to come and attack it, or they're going to. So they all live together as one nice family. Marx calls this primitive communism, where everything is shared by everybody. You have to come with me and visualize that time where there is no concept called individual. There is no I. There is only we. It is all of us. Okay. Understand that in some ways, this idea even today exists in a different form, but it exists in India, which is why most of you actually agreed that the need of the society or the community is greater than the need of the individual. I will repeat. In some ways, this thought process that the herd, that the community, we all share, that is so prevalent and so deep rooted that we think that it is more important than the individual. Okay, this is called primitive communism. This Marx believed is a good time because everybody thought and cared for each other. Every human cared and thought for each other. They worked for each other. They didn't say, when they hunted and they brought a deer, they wouldn't say, this deer is mine. Everybody would share it. So he imagined that it was a good time, and they did whatever they wanted to do. They were absolutely free to do whatever they wanted to do. But with the time, somehow, hierarchies began. Usually how it began also, Marx says. He says that one group of humans and another group of humans, they exist in tribes, in their own parts of the forest. But eventually at some point they grow or they move and they come together and they cross each other. And when they do, there is a conflict. And in that conflict, one party loses and the other party wins. And the party that wins then makes the party that loses its slaves. And he says this is the beginning of slavery. Okay, this is how slavery comes into being, where there are few people. And now what happens using these slaves, because they make the slaves then do hunting and gathering, mostly gathering actually. So once, for this to happen, you need to have some settlement. For slavery to work, you need to have settlement. You can't be really pure hunter. So remember I told you how the women must have started agriculture. Once agriculture starts, you realize that you don't really have to hunt. You settle down, which is called settlement, and then settlers, they're also called the early settlers. And another thing that they do is also they start domesticating animals, cows, buffaloes, bulls, ox to plow the field, horses, donkeys, poultry, sheep. Earliest societies have started domesticating animals. Once they have an agricultural farm, they will also domesticate animals, and then they become settlers. Now, once they become settlers, and if they are able to win over another group, they make them the slaves and they make them work. And then these people become free to think, to develop ideas, to enjoy life. They will write stories, they will create stories, or they'll create art. So in slavery, there is a master and there is a slave. The people who are masters will enjoy life, while the slaves will be the one who will be slogging and be exploited and work hard. Okay. This then progresses into the next level, which is feudalism. In feudalism, again, very similar to slavery, but only thing here, it is even larger settlement, even more development happens, and now you have a feudal lord, you have state, you have religion. It's a much more complex society than slavery, and definitely much more complex than primitive communism. Primitive communism is the earliest kind of society. In feudalism, you have the feudal lords, you have serfs, and the lords control. Feudalism, I went into detail when I taught French Revolution wala conditions in modern Europe lesson. So you remember, I hope you remember feudalism. If not, please go and check that back. So we discussed feudalism, and in feudalism, again, there are two classes, the feudal lords and the serfs. So from primitive communism, what happened is, in slavery, classes emerged. There is one class that is owning resources or powerful, and another class that doesn't. In feudalism also, it's the same. And finally, from feudalism, capitalism emerges. And I told you how the initial feudal lords, for whatever, and we discussed the changes in which this transformation happens from feudalism to capitalism. We'll discuss even more detail. So how that transformation happens, the story or the explanation is different for different theorists. Marx will give you one story of why feudalism turned to capitalism. Weber will give you another story. Durkheim will give you another story. We will discuss Marx's story of why feudalism to capitalism. But for you, it is suffice to know right now that these are the rough stages that Marx believed in. He believed capitalism is an inevitable stage. Every human society will come to capitalism. And he says from capitalism, the society has to move to communism. Communism is a utopia. It is again like primitive communism, but this is an advanced communism. In primitive communism, there was no science, no technology, nothing, no much ideas. But in the communism that is going to come, it is going to be a perfect society, just like the primitive communism. Everybody is going to be equal. People don't have to, we don't have that sense of this is mine, that is yours, private property, ownership, none of this. Everything is equally owned. Everything is provided for according to each one's needs, and everybody will produce according to what they love the best. So I am a teacher, I enjoy teaching, I will teach. Somebody is a painter, they enjoy painting, they are going to paint. Somebody else loves farming, he's going to go do farming and he's going to produce and he's going to share with all of us. Somebody else enjoys technology, he's going to do research and he's going to make new instruments or new appliances which all of us can use. So basically but they do it with the belief that they're doing it for everybody. It is like I am doing it for my family. It's just that the family is the entire community, the entire humankind itself. The differences of you, me, this narrow differences are erased away and we are all one. This is Marx's utopian communism. Now, you obviously can't just jump from capitalism to communism. In between, there is a stage called socialism. And that socialism is when from capitalism, where property is owned by private players, many big players, the state will come and take away from them, which is exactly what Indira Gandhi did in the 60s, nationalization. So the state will come, and that time India was a socialist state. At that time, the tax rate was about 97%, 96% income tax. And of course, nationalization. I mean, the state just goes and takes it because the state can do it anyway. So private property is taken away and all that. And then the state controls. And with the time, the state is dissolved. So private property is forcefully taken by the state. It uses force, and that is part of the revolution, that the proletariat will go take control of the state, and using the state's violence and force and power, they are going to take private property. And once they have owned it, slowly they will disintegrate the state. Once the state is disintegrated, what is left? Just the society. And therefore, what was earlier owned by the state is now owned communally or owned by the society, which is why that phase is called socialism or communism. So these are the stages of society. I think we'll stop here. This is a good intro to Marx. We will stop here. The rest of the topics we will again revisit in the next class on Tuesday.